This session is going to be about search ads, so I thought that before anything else, it might be good to talk about the values of search ads. Is everyone advertising with Apple search ads already in the room, or is anyone not using it right now? At least a couple of people. So why is it interesting? Usually the first thing I tell in terms of why it's an ad network you should investigate is that it has great reach. It also has probably one of the lowest frictions you can expect from an ad network. After all, people who go on the App Store tend to be in the mood for downloading apps. So you also have that benefit when thinking, I can reach a lot of different users. Now, these days, I think what gets most people in user acquisition excited about search ads is that you don't need to have a scan setup perfectly optimized to measure your post-install conversion events. You don't need people to opt in to your ATT prompt. So usually that means the performance you're going to get out of search ads is going to be much cleaner in the measurement part than what you get from other ad networks. The last thing I like to congratulate Apple search ads for is how it works really well with ASO. Apple search ads, technically you never upload creatives. You might use creatives, but those are creatives that your ASO team usually runs. So that kind of makes it an ad network that's more relevant to ASO people sometimes than paid UA people. What we're going to see today is that ideally you want people from both sides talking to each other. The session is about sharing tips to scale your campaigns. And as a disclaimer, most of the tips you're going to see are tips we've put in practice and that we've learned ourselves by working with SoundCloud. SoundCloud is one of our ASO clients with whom we've worked for many years. But last year, we started looking more into Apple search ads with them, and it felt natural because 75% of their installs were coming from search. So at this point, we thought, okay, well, search is clearly something that drives music usage. Maybe let's try to get more downloads there. Problem they had is that when they got started, they had a budget which I would qualify as reasonable, not absolutely ridiculously small, but honestly, maybe not as high as you'd expect for an app the size of SoundCloud. And yet, they were not able to spend all the budget with their particular requirements in terms of cost per install and ROAS. So they turned to us, and the tips we're going to share hopefully can be considered to be tested, since in 4 months they helped us double the amount of installs SoundCloud got from Apple search ads. We went back to using the entire budget, and we decreased cost per install in the process. Quick word of introduction, since I haven't introduced myself yet. My name is Simon. I'm head of ASO at AppTweak. I've been working in App Store marketing for over 7 years now. And some of the things I've done in the process included trying to improve A/B testing models in ASO, or more recently working on the problem of cannibalization with Apple search ads. I work for AppTweak. I see there's at least a couple clients in here, so some of you may know AppTweak already, but what I want everyone to remember about AppTweak today is that it's changed in the past few years. We went from being an ASO platform to a full App Store marketing platform, where there's a suite of products that include market intelligence, an app review manager, reporting studio to visualize your data coming from multiple sources, including MMPs and store consoles. And for today's topic, a search ads campaign manager, because one thing we've also realized for a while now is that if you run Apple search ads using Apple Search as a console provided by Apple, you may spend a lot of time just clicking through different places. And we found that just cleaning a bit of UI and starting to play on automation rules, etc., makes life much easier. So, what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to spend, hopefully not too long, but still some time on what I call the fundamentals. Because most of the tips I have to share derive from those fundamentals and the fact that they can be overlooked at times. Once we've covered that, we'll go into specific methods to grow your keyword pool, grow the number of keywords you're actually bidding on. We're going to also talk about how to get more out of your campaign budgets. And hopefully we'll still have some time at the end to talk about a few more advanced scaling options. So let's talk fundamentals. Hopefully no one is learning here, but there's 4 different inventories you can purchase once you start purchasing Apple Search Ads: Search Results, Search Tab, Today Tab, and Product Page. Most of today's session is really going to focus on Search Results. That's for a couple of reasons. One, it's what most people are already doing. It's the historical placement. 2, it's also the placement that probably offers you the best control over the reach you'll get out of your campaigns, as well as the relevancy of your target audience. The main thing to remember in the fundamentals, though, is how does the search ad auction works? According to Apple Search Ads work as a second price auction where different apps are going to be bidding for impressions, and the highest bidder will win the auction, but only have to pay the price that was the second highest bid plus 1 cent. In practice, though, this is not what we've observed. We've observed that in many cases, you may end up winning the auction without having to be the highest bidder. So we asked ourselves, why is that? Apple has not officially confirmed our theory, but I think any reasonable product manager would see that what makes sense is if we start thinking the way to determine the winner of an auction should be a way that gets Apple the most revenue out of search ads. And if we consider that what advertisers are bidding on are impressions, but what they have to pay is a cost per tap, not a cost per impression, then actually the winner of the auction has to be the best balance between who has the best tap-through rate and who has the highest bid. So using the same theoretical numbers, what you see on screen is a visualization of how the second highest bidder in a model with 3 different bids could end up winning with a price that's below their maximum cost per tap, but still higher than the cost per tap of the next lower bidder. What that also teaches us is that when we're going to approach search ads, there's going to be different types of metrics to consider. I'll basically assume everyone should have a target metric that's either cost per install or return on ad spend. So these, we actually don't really change in optimizing campaigns, or the goal at least is we know we have a certain cap and we're going to be happy or unhappy with the result of our campaigns based on performance. The key metrics we'll have, these are going to be the metrics where we are going to be making a lot of changes. These are the metrics that you directly control when entering an auction. These are going to be the bid, your daily budget, and the keywords you choose to bid on. And finally, we'll have what I'll call roughly control metrics. These are the impression share you get on a given keyword, the tap-through rate, and the conversion rate as measured by the number of installs divided by the number of tabs. These are metrics that you can easily report on with your Apple Search Ads campaign. You don't necessarily control all of it, but what they tell you is what is going to actually influence how we choose to bid on different campaigns. So, as I said, one metric we have is the keywords we choose to bid on. So let's talk about how to find keywords that are worth bidding on. Maybe as a disclaimer, how many in the rooms would say that 80% or plus of your search ads campaign is being used by only 3 keywords? Are you guys unhappy with that? At least one person is unhappy. Don't be, or at least not necessarily. In the end, if those are the best 3 performers, they might as well use most of your budget. They could use all of your budget until you can get more budget. This is good news. You're spending money on the good keywords. The one challenge in those situations is always what happens if a competitor moves in on that keyword and suddenly I go from having 3 performing keywords to 2. So that's why we're going to talk about discovering keywords. It's just making sure we keep options available, and we may even find better performing keywords in the process. This, I think, is what most people see when they go into their search ads console. That's the standard model that's recommended pretty much everywhere when it comes to setting up campaigns. Set up a brand defense campaign, have a competitor campaign, have one campaign for generic keywords, and last but not least, have a discovery campaign. And the discovery campaign is supposed to just be using Apple's search match targeting algorithm. This algorithm is really not that bad. It actually will find keywords you're not bidding on with the other campaigns, and it will try to give you keywords that respect the bid and the daily budget you've set for your campaign. So one problem we've seen is that a lot of time people set up a discovery campaign and then they forget about it. So they've discovered, let's say, 5 new keywords. They can look in the results of the search match campaign and say, well, we have 5 keywords that are quite good performers. We see a good conversion rate, for instance. What do? Oh, campaign is bidding on them. Let's leave them there. Problem is, if the goal was to have a campaign that's aimed at discovery, you're not discovering anymore. You're just bidding on 5 more keywords. So the way we found around that is something that's pretty simple once you have automation rules. And it's just to have what I call a dynamic pipeline, where we're going to set on purpose a low bid and a low daily budget for our discovery campaign, because we just want to make sure Apple doesn't end up bidding on crazy keywords that are not relevant for us. And we're going to frequently monitor the results of that campaign to find keywords that have a good conversion rate. When we do so, we're going to look at what kind of keyword is it. Is it a brand name? Is it ours? Is it someone else's? Is it a generic keyword? And we're going to add that keyword in one of our other campaigns as an exact match. That will have the benefit of just making sure that keyword can now be targeted with maybe a higher bid based on the rules and how we can optimize with a conversion rate. That keyword can also receive a higher daily budget. And then obviously we're also going to add the keyword we found as a negative keyword in our discovery campaign, just as a way of instructing that campaign, please move on, find another good keyword instead of this one. There are some additional plays we could go for, but to keep it simple, the other thing that usually goes well with finding keywords is using AI. I think it's quite popular to say that these days, but I want to tell you about the AI that AppTweak has developed. It's called Atlas AI. And it's basically an AI that's only trained on App Store data. What it allows us to do is just see for 2 keywords, not only which are the apps ranking on these 2 keywords, but are these keywords semantically close with regards to the App Store. So here you have a graph that shows you how 12 different apps can be represented by colors, and each color has many dots highlighting the number of keywords they rank for. And as a result, we can start seeing which apps are closer to one another, which keywords are closer to one another, and that allows us to get to the notion of a keyword cluster. And so when it comes to search ads, what we're going to do is whenever we find a good performer in our keywords, what we can do as well is just ask our machine what are keywords around this first keyword. And what we're going to get is not only a list of keywords, but they'll also be classified in different clusters. We'll see for each cluster how many different keywords do we see, and we can calculate for those what is the total number of impressions available per month, how relevant are these keywords also to our app. So once we have our keyword, we're going to have to also talk about how to optimize campaigns. And here, I've decided I will actually try to answer a question I've heard multiple times that has always driven me crazy. What's a good cost per tap? If you have no idea whatsoever, I think what you'd hear most of the time is try to look at benchmarks. And so we do have benchmarks. Good news is our benchmarks give you metrics such as the median cost per tap for a certain category, but also for a type of campaign. We can play on different metrics, but these are and always will be benchmarks. And benchmarks, this is my annual shout out to Thomas Petit. Benchmarks are always tough to use to compare yourself, just because they're not about your app. They're about a group of apps that can be very different from yours in the end, even if you belong to the same category. So what's a good cost per tap? If you just need to input any value at first, you can look to a benchmark. But in the long run, a good cost per tap is first one that you can afford. Very important to remember. It's really simple. It sounds obvious, but the first thing to know is making sure your cost per tap leads to a cost per install that's below the maximum set by your manager. The second thing is that a good cost per tap keeps changing. There are a lot of different variables going into an auction. The first one is who else is bidding on the keyword. And so you might be winning the auction today at $1 per tap. If tomorrow your biggest competitor in the auction pulls out, then it might not be a good cost per tap anymore. Maybe you have to decrease, or if there's another competitor entering, maybe you have to increase. And as long as it's still affordable, it's still a good cost per tap because it gets you to win the auction. So where do we go from there? Well, let's talk about what we want to do to what's our decision tree for making certain decisions on our campaigns. This is when I talk to you about impression share or share of voice as one control metric that we use to actually make a lot of our decisions. If you remember the auction, we saw the auction for one impression, but unless you're able to change your bid for each impression, which I honestly doubt, in practice, you're going to be in the auction for multiple impressions, and usually that's the point. So the question we get then is, does a winner change auction per auction? And the answer is usually only if one member of the auction changes their bid, or if there's just a different participant in the auction. So in the end, our goal with any auction should be to win everything. If there's 100 impressions available for the keyword, and that keyword is working well for me, I want the 100 impressions. I might not be sure I get all 100, but Apple does share something called the impression share report, where I can see ranges of tens of percents that tell me where I'm at in terms of monopolizing the impressions. So the max I can get is 90% impression share. If I have 90% impression share, then the reality is I can no longer scale on this keyword. I will need to move on to a different keyword. But before I do that, I should remember I may not be needing to spend as much. If I'm winning across the board, can I check that I'm spending the least amount of money I can? So at this point, the advice will be just try iterating small decreases on your bid until you get to that moment where you no longer have 90% impression share. When you do, go back up. Don't let other people win. And then start measuring how much budget you've just saved, because that budget can then be redirected to other keywords where you may need to, on the contrary, increase the budget or increase your bid. If we don't have all of the impressions available in the auction, then before we just follow Apple rules and raise our bids, one thing to check is what's happening with our daily budget. Your daily budget is officially an optional parameter, but it tends to really cap what's happening with your campaigns. And so if you see that you're spending all of your daily budget, sometimes you can even spend a little more because of how the daily budget is actually calculated. If you're in this situation and you don't have all the impressions, before you start going bidding on other keywords or before you raise your bid, just increase the daily budget. That could be enough to get you to have 90% impression share. Once you see it's not the case, once you see you have not used all the daily budget and you're still not having all the impressions, that's the moment where you have to consider, do I want to raise my bid? And so here, the question will be first, can I afford it? And second, are there any cheaper keywords that need my attention first? Speaking of costs, I did mention cannibalization is a worry of mine. So let's talk about it. Brand defense is especially affected by cannibalization. Technically, it's not the only type of campaign. Brand defense is quite natural. If you're bidding on a keyword for which you rank #1 organically, you could still be cannibalizing as well. So the challenge we have is, what can we do to avoid cannibalization? And what I hear most of the time is either do brand defense or do not. That doesn't go well with me just because I like numbers. So something I've looked into was, could we have an idea of how much we're cannibalizing on a particular keyword? And from that number, can we decide if it's worth it? Because unfortunately, Apple doesn't let us bid only based on the identity of other competitors. There are some tools we're working on to try and change that, but in practice, if I'm Uber, I don't get to tell Apple only bid if that prevents Lyft from bidding. And so if Komoot is bidding on my brand, I may not want to defend. If Lyft is bidding, I want to defend. So our challenge is going to be, how can we account for this notion of our cost of cannibalization changing based on who else is bidding? And there are a couple ways to actually try and measure this. One would be just looking at who else is in the auction, who else is winning auctions, and starting to make hypotheses as to what their install rate is going to be. Another option would be just pausing campaigns for 1 or 2 weeks to just create a baseline and look at the difference between the total search measured by App Store Connect during that time compared to what you would have predicted by taking the total search and removing your daily installs from search ads. In both cases, what we can take from there is have this idea of what is the percentage of cannibalized installs, and with that number, start going to what I call the cost per protected install. So the example I have here, it's on purpose simplistic. It's not how it would probably happen in the end. But let's say I'm Uber. Today I have 80% impression share on my own brand, and a CVR of 25%. I see Komoot and Lyft as the other two apps that are winning the auction. And I'm just going to guess. Let's say Komoot has 2% CVR, Lyft has 10. This is a hypothesis, but if I make many hypotheses, I can start getting a bit closer to the truth. If I stop bidding on my own brand, basically my impressions, unless someone else joins the auction, my impressions are probably going to be divided between Komoot and Lyft. So by then, I can calculate how many installs are going to get to these two apps. And the answer is, I can do a weighted average for their CVR in my estimation and see that they will be taking 96 installs. 96 installs, that means that I still have 504 that I'm basically cannibalizing in this theory. And so if I now divide my daily ad spend by not the number of installs overall, but just the number of protected installs, I'm seeing my cost per protected install is at 2.08. That definitely looks a lot more expensive than the cost per install reported by Apple. At the same time, it's not necessarily that expensive. I'm pretty sure there are keywords that are still costing more. And so the whole point of looking into cannibalization, in my opinion, should be that you should model what is the actual cost per protected install to compare with your other campaigns, because there are definitely cases where it's worth doing, and there are cases where you can just start moving some budget to other keywords that are actually cheaper. Last quick tip about budget. If you've ever run out of budget on one of your campaigns, that may also have happened to your competitors. And here, this is a completely fictional example, by the way, but if we're imagining bidding on food delivery and we run out of budget somewhere between 9 and 10 p.m., well, I regret to say people are still eating. And that means that if it's happening to your competitors, you may want to actually start playing on hourly timings for your campaigns to invest your budget when people are most likely to be out of their budget. And this can apply to daily budgets, but a lot of companies also have monthly or quarterly targets with their budgets. So for instance, I can tell you that the end of March can be quite fun when suddenly you start winning a lot of auctions with not that high bids just because people who used to win it just ran out of budget. I'm going to go quick because I think we're already going into overtime, but with the advanced scaling options, there's a couple tips I want to share. One is using demographics targeting in Apple Search Ads. This usually is a no. And that's because when you go into these parameters, technically you only get access to 22% of the audience before you apply the filter. 78% of App Store users are opted out of these parameters. The one caveat is that if we look at non-search results campaigns, I tend to not love them a ton because they have much lower relevancy. We can see a much higher gap between our cost per tap and our cost per install. But when we have low relevancy but very high reach, which is the case with Search Tab and Today Tab, starting to use things like demographics targeting can help narrow down on that reach and get back to a healthier situation. That works even better if we start using CPPs. So With CPPs, I'll spare you the detailed version because it's a 40-minute talk I did at APS Berlin last year, so we won't have time for this today. But important to consider is, if we look at search results, if I'm Max, targeting HBO, targeting TV shows, targeting movies as keywords with my default creatives goes quite well. Now, people don't always know Max also has sports. So if I actually release a CPP, what's going to happen is that on the keyword, my tap-through rate and my conversion rates are likely, it's not automatic, but they're likely to go up. And even more importantly, if the tap-through rate goes up, then actually one thing we're also getting is better chances of winning the auction. Because remember, the tap-through rate is one of the parameters that determines the winner. So CPPs are important to test, and if you want to hear about an entire framework for that, we can speak later. One thing to find quickly where to start, though, is this little conditional formatting you can use on Excel. So this is something I actually did with SoundCloud, where we just exported the impression share report from Apple, and I just tried this formula to say, I want to quickly highlight which keywords have a conversion rate, number of installs, that's less than 50% of the number of taps. I did put a control of at least 20 plus taps, simply because I wanted to make sure I would not give too much attention to very low performing keywords. And that helped me identify a few keywords for which just pushing a CPP about the Go Plus subscription of SoundCloud helped really increase conversion. Last thing before I leave you, when it comes to always going further with search ads, remember that keywords change also in terms of who's searching for what, depending on the time of the week, the time of the day, the time of the year. And so something that we are working on quite intensely right now is finding more of these seasonal keywords so that people can start investigating when is the right moment to start bidding on this, because the keyword is about to have a big spike in search volume. That will be it for today. Thank you very much to everyone. If you want the slides, you can scan the QR code.